Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Good to have you here. My name is Paul, as the intro said, and I am glad that you tuned in to another episode of Love and Abuse. As with every episode on this show, I want you to know that all information is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being. And my newly added disclaimer, always pick your battles wisely. You just want to make sure that the person that you're dealing with isn't going to be over-the-top aggressive or hurtful, and that you won't be able to handle it. You know, pick the battles that you can handle, and sometimes you have to pick the battles that you can't handle because you don't think you can. But you can handle a lot. Because if you're in any type of emotionally abusive relationship, you've already handled a heck of a lot. You've already gone through the ringer. And if you know anyone that is abusive toward you, you know what I mean. So give yourself some credit that you have a very strong spirit and you will get through this and you will see the other side of it. How do I know that? I don't know. But if you don't hear it, you may never believe it. And I need you to believe it. I need you to believe that you will see the other side of this and it will be good. You will get through it and the fog will lift and your head will clear and you will feel better again. So remember that. If you don't believe it, then it's a lot better than some of the stuff that emotionally abusive people want you to believe. That's for sure. So you need to hear the other side of this too. The other side of hurtful and manipulative behavior is kind and supportive and caring behavior. That's what you need to hear more of. That's why it's important to surround yourself with people that support you, that love you, that care about you, that want you to be happy. If you're surrounded by people that you believe they love you, but they don't make you feel loved or supported or cared for, then you may not be choosing the right people to hang around with, or you may have no choice. But this is why you need to be around people that are the opposite end of what you usually deal with. You need supportive, kind, caring, loving, compassionate people in your life to offset any abusive or hurtful behavior from someone else. So just remember that. Take an assessment of your life and make sure that you are at least balancing it out. And at most, having an abundance of supportive, loving, caring people in your life, so that you aren't so convinced that you're a bad person or you're responsible for all the problems and all you need to do is change who you are in order for the other person and the relationship to be happy. Because if that's all you hear, you'll start to believe it. You'll start to believe that you are the bad person and you are the one that's at fault for everything. And you'll feel guilty and you'll feel sad and you'll feel confused because you're trying. On and on. You will feel all these things if you rely on people that don't have your best interest in mind to fulfill you or tell you about your worth and your lovability. If you have a reliance on these people to tell you your worth and lovability, and they're making you believe the opposite of feeling worthy and lovable, then you're listening to the wrong people, or at least you're believing the wrong people. You're believing the wrong things about yourself. So take an inventory of the people in your life and your support system, your support structure, and make sure it's at least 50-50, if not greater than that. The greater side being more positive and supportive. Because you need to hear that stuff. You need to hear that you are lovable, you are worthy, and you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be treated with respect, and you deserve to be treated with kindness. Every episode I tell you that, and that needs to help balance out what you may be dealing with. So whatever you're dealing with, remember those words, because you need to latch on to something that helps you, not hurts you. You need to latch on to things that are empowering, not disempowering. Things that are healthy, not unhealthy. There's more I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about something else, and this is addiction in relationships. Now, you may not be in a relationship where someone's addicted, but there's a lot of behaviors that come out when someone's addicted that are very similar to when someone's not addicted. My experience with addiction has to do with my upbringing. I have not studied this professionally, but I know a lot of it experientially. So what you're going to hear today is my knowledge of it experientially, meaning I've experienced this personally, firsthand, not only in my upbringing, but also in my marriage. And her addiction was a trigger for me to become emotionally abusive, to be a person who guilted her and a person who gave her that look and gave her the silent treatment and just made her feel bad. And if this is the first time you've heard this show, yes, I was emotionally abusive in my previous relationships. I admit it. I am very transparent about that. And it ruined all my relationships. And to heal from that was a very enlightening process and painful process, because it meant changing who I was almost down to the core. I really had to dig in there and get very clear about what I was doing and how I was making my partners in life feel over the years. And once I figured it out, it was the light bulb moment that changed my life, that took me in a whole new direction. And all the burden of judgment and wanting to control disappeared. It just felt like a relief to me as the former emotional abuser to have this heavy burden on me the whole time of wanting to control people and my environment. It made me unhappy unless I controlled. So I don't like that I was an emotionally abusive person, and at the same time, you may not get the perspective that you're getting now had I not crossed that chasm to healing. That doesn't mean I'm fully healed. That doesn't mean I'm here to tell you that I'm perfect now. I still have to work on things, but it's a completely different set of variables now. It's old patterns that show up, and I catch them and say, wait. I don't want to do that. That's old behavior. I have to stop doing that. I have to figure that out. I have to reflect on that, and I have to heal that inside me. So you may hear me talk about behaviors that I'm not proud of from my past, but I want to give you my experiential understanding of all of this. And I have never experienced a true addiction like my stepfather is currently still addicted. And my ex-wife, I don't know if she is addicted, but she was addicted to sweets. She was an emotional eater. And I don't know if anyone else was in my life that was addicted, but addictions can play a massive role in manipulation and abuse on both sides. But I'm not here to talk about the side that I was on with the addict. I'm here to talk about what somebody asked me in a private Facebook group that I run about addiction and manipulation, and what role does it play for someone who manipulates or does emotionally abusive behavior. There probably won't be a lot to talk about in this episode, but I will tell you this. When you are dealing with someone who's a true addict, the addiction almost always, if not always, overpowers their ability to make healthy decisions. Let me rephrase that. When you are with an addict, someone who requires a substance or a form of recreation or something that they keep going back to over and over again, whether it's drugs or alcohol or porn or gambling, when you are with somebody that can't stop, their behavior, their addiction overrides almost everything in their life. So that means that even though they see that you're hurting, that you want them to stop, that you care about them and you love them, and they can see that they're hurting themselves even a lot of the times. The addiction is so strong that it keeps pulling them back and they can't stop it. And if you've never been addicted, you may not understand that. Well, why can't you just stop? I remember I used to have this belief. Well, if you don't want to smoke, why go to the store at all and buy cigarettes? That was my belief, that you just stop going to the store to buy cigarettes. If you don't leave the house, then you can't get smokes. An addiction like cigarette smoking, for example, can be so compelling that someone won't have any shoes and they'll walk up 3 miles to a store in the snow. You know, the old saying that your grandparents walked 3 miles uphill both ways to school. That's pretty much what an addict goes through. They will do that. They will do anything they can to get their addiction met. Now, there's chemical addictions where the body gets addicted and it's very hard to stop because the body craves it. And there's emotional addictions where the emotions that you're experiencing are too painful or too intense to feel. So you stuff down those emotions with some sort of addiction. And I'm speaking very generically here. I know there's other ways to look at this, but I can look at something like alcohol consumption. A lot of people drink and continue to drink because of some emotional thing they're dealing with, or they started drinking because of some emotional thing they're dealing with, and it became a physical addiction. So whatever trauma or neglect or abuse or whatever they dealt with when they were younger, whatever is inside of them that they can't figure out how to heal from or how to process or how to get past it, they will use the alcohol or whatever substance or activity they do in order to mask what they're feeling. And it's so strong that most people won't have an effect on their logic or their behavior. I remember having a conversation with my stepfather once. We were at an airport, and I don't know what came over me, but I just asked him the question, why don't you stop drinking? I mean, that's a valid question. Why don't you stop drinking? But I wouldn't normally ask that, so I'm not sure what state of mind I was in at that time, but I guess we were having an open conversation. And he said something I'll never forget. He said, "It's just too late for me." That's what he said. I heard that, and I thought, no, it's not. You can stop any time. And he said, no, it's just too late. I can't stop. And that was it. That was the only time I ever talked about alcohol with my stepfather. From that point on, I didn't know what to do. I was pretty young. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. But it was clear to me that it wasn't going to stop, and that his drinking overrode any logic or any empathy or sympathy. It overrode any behavior toward anyone else because he had to make that the priority. So these addictions become the priority in some people's lives. And when they're addicted, they are going to do and say things that are hurtful, that are manipulative, that are lies. They're going to lie a lot. You know, some addicts, I'm not saying all addicts are like this, but when you're in a manipulative or emotionally abusive situation, the addiction exacerbates their behavior, and it's almost inevitable that you're going to get worse behavior when they're addicted. In other words, you can have one person that might be emotionally abusive without an addiction, but when they have an addiction, they are likely more compelled to behave worse than they do. And the reason is because they have a lot going on under the hood. They have a lot going on underneath, where not only are they trying to mask any pain or not feel any hurt from the past or deal with any anger issues or trauma or abuse issues, they're already trying their best to do that. But when they're abusive toward you, it's almost always because they don't want to deal with what's going on inside of them, or they don't know how to deal with what's going on inside of them. And then you add an addiction, and the addiction on top of their bad behavior just 10 times it. I mean, it multiplies it, and it makes it very difficult because now any sense of control that they had sort of goes out the window. I mean, when you're addicted, that's the one thing you don't have. You don't have control. So when they're not addicted, let's just say it's an alcoholic or someone on drugs, and they get drunk or they get high, it's harder to control themselves when they're in that state as opposed to when they're not drunk or high. And that's important because when they're already being emotionally abusive toward you, they probably have some sense of control, even though they're being hurtful. Meaning they probably hold back everything they want to say or do. But when you're drunk or high, you might not hold back. You might actually go further than you would because what's lost? The filtering. The filtering of their own behavior is lost. Their own control mechanism is shut down. Again, I'm only talking about certain people. I'm not saying every addict does this. I'm just saying addictions can exacerbate emotionally abusive behavior because the control mechanisms are taken away. And when the control mechanisms are taken away, anything can happen. They can say anything, they can do anything, and they could get worse because they don't have the ability to self-control. And when you have somebody that already has a lot of pain or anger or unresolved issues inside of them, they're already dealing with that. When they drink, that can be so amplified and so hard to deal with that you just don't want to be around them. I mean, there are people that get drunk, there are people that get high, that they're okay to be around. Maybe they're funny, maybe they're just, they go to sleep. Like I can't get past a second drink myself because I get tired. I just go to sleep. But somebody who continues to drink or continues to take any type of substance that gets them high or alters their state, if they continue to do that, what's going to happen is they're going to be so altered that all the roadblocks are out and they can become sometimes a nightmare. With my stepfather, his problem was alcohol, it still is, and when he's not on alcohol, he's a perfectly normal, caring, loving, generous person. And this is one of the hard things about some addicts is that they can be healthy in every other respect except for the addiction. They can be caring and supporting and loving and generous, and it's very hard to not like these people. But when they're drinking or getting high or whatever their addiction is, they change. And this isn't necessarily exactly the same for gambling addictions and porn addictions, because that seems like a private activity that they do on their own, and they can lose a lot. They can lose their marriage, they can lose their finances, they can lose everything when they have these other addictions that they can't control. But the substance addictions that I'm talking about, they're typically a little bit in the red zone of having to deal with it because it changes their personality. I mean, all addictions can change someone's personality, but the substance addictions are definitely prevalent during the addiction, and those addictions are typically done with other people in the room. There's only one person I know that gets drunk alone because he doesn't want to make trouble with his partner, and they get along great. If they ever listen to this show, I'm just saying I support your relationship. He likes to drink, and she doesn't like to see him drink, and they live in separate places. And when he drinks, he doesn't call her. They don't get in touch. He drinks, on his own, or maybe he drinks with a buddy. I don't know, but they don't have any contact when he drinks. And as long as they don't have any contact, when they meet, they're happy together and they get along great. It can work. It can work because the rest of the time, he's a great guy. He's caring and generous and loving. So his personality is there. It's what we see in some addicts is that we want to love them, but they turn into this nightmare or they turn into this monster or whatever it is. So it's very hard to love them, or we have this mix of feelings. Like I have a mix of feelings toward my stepfather. I absolutely don't care about him anymore, and I do. And that is tough because he's done some heinous things. He's done some awful, awful things, unforgivable things. Yet I've seen both sides of him. It's very Jekyll and Hyde. So it's very difficult. It's almost like traumatic bonding or trauma bonding that you've heard me talk about. You've probably learned about it in other ways too. When you get a deep, loving, emotional connection with someone and then they're abusive, you start to equate love and abuse, how I got the name of this show, together. And what ends up happening is that You feel unhappy most of the time, and you're loving someone that makes you unhappy and actually sometimes puts fear in you. So the combination of the good feelings of love and the bad feelings of fear start to intertwine, and it becomes very traumatic for the person experiencing it. And that's why it's hard for some people to leave emotionally abusive people, because they will feel this trauma bond with them. And it will be very hard for them to separate because they see the good, or they know it's in there. There is a difference between that, by the way. Let me just say this. There's a difference between seeing the good in someone, because it comes out every now and then, and knowing it's in there, but you don't see it. I want you to be very aware of that difference. Knowing it's in there means that you saw it one time in the past, or many times, but it's not in there anymore. You really have to see the person as who they are today and how they're treating you today. Because if you're looking for something that was once there, but it's not anymore, it's not there. It's not. I mean, you have to see it that way in order for you to make the right decisions for you, instead of waiting and hoping and praying that they change, because whatever was there, it's not anymore. They can make the choice to bring it back. They can make the choice to heal from whatever they're doing, but it's not there. So I want you to be very clear that what you once saw that you don't see anymore isn't there anymore. Now, if you still see the person that you know is in there every now and then, their behavior changes, then you might have a better chance reconciling or healing with this person. There's a better chance. I'm not saying it's going to work out great, but there's a better chance of making something work with this person. But you have to be very careful, because they're either empathetic and they know they're hurting you and it hurts them to hurt you, which is a different story than the person who isn't empathetic. They know they're hurting you and it doesn't really bother them. I want you to make that distinction as well. So you have the person that once was kind and supportive and loving and caring, but they're no longer. There's one person. Then you have the person that every now and then shows that they're kind and loving and supporting and caring. And when they're not, they realize it, or at least realize it later, and they feel bad about it, and they don't like it inside themselves, and they don't like hurting you. There's that type of person. Then there's the third type of person, and I'm sure there's more types here. I haven't thought this through fully. The third type of person is the one who does show kindness and caring and support and love, but when they're acting badly or they're treating you with disrespect and unkindness, and they don't feel bad about it, and in fact they think you deserve it, that's a third type of person. And that is something that you have to be aware of in yourself, because if you have any type of traumatic bond to any of these people, I want you to be aware of what you're dealing with and what you'll get from this relationship. You have to be careful about what you select for your future. Because if you're selecting the first type, where that good, healthy behavior was once there, but it's not anymore, then you're selecting more of the same, which is what you get today. And the same goes with the other two. You're getting more of the same for the other two, but only one of the other two has a chance. And like I've said before, empathy has to be in there. The person has to have empathy so that you know they care, and they also have to not like their own behavior to some extent. They may still think they're right, but they have to not like their behavior to some extent, to the point where they realize they need to stop treating you badly. There's a chance there. And of course, the third type, it's just not going to work. If they don't have empathy and they don't care, it's a very selfish thing, and they're just doing things that work for them. And if you just happen to be happy one day, it was just a side effect of something they did for themselves. So you have to be careful. Just be careful there. So I took that little tangent just to talk about that for a moment. But coming back to what I was talking about with the addicted person, and especially addressing this person who reached out to me and said they wanted to know addiction's role in manipulation. Let me tell you, in a nutshell, what addiction's role in manipulation is that a true addict will do anything they can, regardless of who's involved, to get their addiction met. Now, that's important to understand, as well as everything else I'm talking about today. It's important to understand that the addiction usually takes priority. Almost always, the addiction takes priority. This doesn't mean it's against you. It doesn't mean they don't care about you. It doesn't mean they don't love you. It doesn't mean that they want to see you suffer. I mean, some people might, but the fact that they can't stop the addiction doesn't mean it's about you or against you. In fact, you have to take yourself out of that equation. You have to take yourself out of the idea that they don't care about you enough to stop. That's not it at all. The addiction isn't about them caring enough about you to stop. There could be some people out there that do that and stop because of that, and bravo if that happens. But you have to take yourself out of that. You have to stop thinking that you're more important than the addiction, because you're not. And that's hard to take. It's a hard truth. But I want to tell you, because if you're dealing with anyone that's addicted to anything, that addiction is much more important than almost anything else in their life and anyone else in their life. That doesn't mean all addicts. I'm just saying in general, this is what I've seen. This is my own experience. I've seen that no matter what comes along, the addiction is still going to be there. Unless they're on a program, unless they're working on this, unless they're trying, you can't expect an addict to see you crying and them follow through with a change. I want you to not expect that. I want you to not expect them to care so much about you that they'll stop. This isn't easy to hear. It's not easy to say, because I know that there are people out there that have stopped their addictions because of other people. But I don't really want you wasting too much time trying to convince an addict that your relationship is more important, that your feelings are more important, that anything is more important than their addiction. I don't want you to waste your time doing that. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't try it once or twice and see what happens, but if they continue going back to that addiction, that's when you need to step back, take yourself out of the equation, and realize this isn't about me at all. This is not about you at all. It's about their addiction. It's about their emotional state. It's about their mental state. It's the thing they need to deal with. This is why when I talk about codependency on my other show, The Overwhelmed Brain, I talk about how sometimes you need to let people crash. And that can be scary. That can be dangerous. That can be deadly. I know. Sometimes you have to let people hit bottom. And that might mean they hit the bottom so hard they're not here anymore. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And I don't know the stats on that. But the people in my life that have been addicted, when they hit bottom, it was the wake-up call they needed. They need the wake-up call. And your tears, your feelings, your thoughts, your words are rarely enough for that wake-up call. If they accidentally hurt someone, if they're drunk driving and they kill someone, if they're high and they fall asleep and the house catches on fire, I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen that can change their mind, but most of them need to hit bottom. And because of that, it's very, very difficult to convince them or tell them anything. Now, when it comes to the role of manipulation and emotional abuse, the addict is already fighting something inside of them, the emotional demons that they're dealing with, by being emotionally abusive, by being hurtful. Add to that the addiction. Now their gloves are off and their punches hurt harder. And hopefully that's just a metaphor, but this can be real too for some people. This can be physical abuse because the addiction takes over and they're a different person. Their personality seems to shift in most people. But you do have to know that the addiction can usually amplify the emotional abuse. So to the person who asked me about this, I don't know if I'm covering every aspect of what you want to hear, but I do know what often happens is the other people in that relationship think that there's a way they can convince the addict to change, or if they show how much they're hurt by the addict, they'll change. And I want to say to you that I wouldn't spend too much time doing that. And it's not because you're not special or lovable or worthy. It's because the addiction takes over. And the addiction is their primary need in life. It's like every time you get hungry, Think about every time you get hungry, you feel like you have to eat. You know you have to eat. So you go to the fridge, you go to the pantry, you do whatever you can to put food in your stomach. That is very similar to an addiction, except the body needs the food. The body doesn't need most addictions, but the body gets tricked into thinking it needs it because of the replacement that addiction often does, which is replacing dealing with your feelings, replacing exercise, or replacing good habits, replacing therapy. Whatever the addiction's replacing, it becomes normal for them. Just like eating food when we're hungry becomes normal for us. And I can almost guarantee you that if you have been hungry for days, that as soon as you have food, you're going to want to scarf it up. In fact, let's take food out of the mix and make it water. We need water. I mean, people can fast when it comes to food. They can not eat food. And so it may not be a good analogy for them, but how about water? We all need water. After 4 or 5 days without water, you're going to want water. I want you to think of that feeling of being so thirsty and having no water for days. This starts to give you the feeling that addicts get. They need that supply. They need to fulfill themselves with this so that they don't have to feel whatever they're feeling. And you might be feeling thirsty, and they are feeling thirsty for something else. This is what happens. And when you're thirsty, if somebody came along and said, hey, before you drink water, let's go to the movies and have a romantic evening, you're probably going to say, no, I don't want that. And they might think, well, why not? I thought you loved me. I thought we could spend time together. Are you saying that water is more important than I am? You're going to say, yes, right now it is absolutely the most important thing in my life. This is how I see many addicts, is that they make it the most important thing in their life. And it becomes so important to them that it's almost an unconscious pull. It pulls them. They don't even know they're doing it sometimes. They're just in the middle of it going, what am I doing? I'm doing it. Oh, well, I can't stop now because I'm replacing whatever I need with this, and it makes me feel better. It gives me some sort of high, gives me some sort of relief. So the addict becomes so addicted, just like we need water, they need their supply, they need their source to feel better. And of course, if they're already an emotionally abusive person or hurtful or a liar, then the addiction is going to make it worse. They're going to lie about it. They're going to lie about that, what they did. And it's not about you. It's not about you at all. It's about their need because they're so thirsty. I don't know if that really helps anyone in a situation like this, but I just want you to make sure that you aren't blaming yourself. You aren't thinking that you're not doing enough. You really can't do anything until they decide to do it for themselves. I want you to be aware of that, and I want you to take this with you just in case you're dealing with anyone in your life that's an addict, and I hope it helps. Share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook provides an evaluation of your relationship based on a 200-point assessment. It's geared toward romantic relationships, but many have used it to determine if family or others in their life are being manipulative or emotionally abusive as well. If you're in a difficult relationship and would like to pinpoint the unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad, let the workbook help you discover the specific components of bad behavior and put into words what you're experiencing. Get the tools you need to help you reach clarity. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are. Thanks for joining me today. We'll talk again soon.